because they're looking at a quasi breakdown, and they don't seem to be able to get beyond in their minds of a world that is so seriously gone awry that we're actually living in basically a medieval type of a setting. And I not only I don't want to see it, but you know, when I read history and I look at everything from all the different sources that I have read over the years, you know, I don't see any other possibility than that's the kind of scenario we're going to be faced with eventually in America. And that being the case, there needs to be a region of the country that is capable of doing what I'm saying is going to need to be done. And that's a region that has the terrain that is survivable, defendable, if you will, enough of a population base that is like-minded, that has the same, you know, basically values, moral values, spiritual values, that has resources, natural resources. Wood, like I said, for heating, wood for building, all different kinds of construction, that has the water, and we're talking lakes, we're talking rivers, we're talking systems of water, streams, ponds, and springs. And so, you know, I'm seeing that the Ozark, this region, the Ozark Plateau, is the only place in the country that is completely undershot by aquifer systems. Anywhere you want to drill a well, you'll get water. There's 2.5 billion gallons of water coming out of the ground in springs every day if it doesn't rain. And that is only counting their springs are rated in magnitudes, the flow. Over 100 cubic feet per second, CFS, is a first magnitude spring. Missouri has about 15 of those, ballpark, 12 to 15. Second magnitude is 10 to 100, 1 to 10, et cetera, et cetera. And so for the first three magnitudes of springs, total is 2.5 billion gallons. So there may be 5 billion gallons. You know, you put a black dot in every spring in the Ozarks, and the Ozarks are black, you know. There's a lot of springs, you know. Anyway, so we need to have the terrain, we need to have people, we need to have water, and that is all of those that together can create a place, a region that has food production. And one thing about the Ozark Plateau, the Ozark region, is that it is one of the greatest, I've heard it described as the greatest place on earth for survival agriculture. Now, another way to describe that in terms of, you know, agricultural terms is biodiversity. You don't have monocultural crops here. We don't have, I mean, there is some of that. There's a lot of that. You know, Monsanto's got their farms in here, and there's, you know, there's some monoculture going on. But by and large, the agriculture here is very diverse. And a lot of farms have multiple methods or multiple means of food production. Goats and chickens and a garden and an orchard and a vineyard and a cow or two, you know. And if you don't, your neighbor does. And some people, like, we're focusing more now on cattle. A friend of ours has several hundred goat. Everybody's got chickens. Those are easy, you know. Most people have chickens. So multiple diverse methods of food production, multiple and diverse ways of getting water. Again, rainfall. I didn't mention rainfall earlier, but rainfall, lakes, streams, da-da-da-da-da, springs, wells. 80% of the water in the Ozarks is drinking water from wells, and 80% of the water in the rest of the country is from retreated water. So, so I'm looking at the situation where a region that will be a good, safe region. And the question was asked earlier, and I tried to deal with the question, I mean, how do you convince Americans that life could change and they won't be able to get their Big Mac? Somebody came out to visit us, and we were going to some little tiny town, and they said, is there a Starbucks there? No, there's not a Starbucks within 50 miles of us. You know, we don't have a Walmart in this county. You know, Stockton is the county seat. We don't have a stoplight. We don't have a police force. You know, there's a county sheriff, but you know, there's no police force in Stockton. They made a bad financial deal, and they got rid of them. They said, well, what can we eliminate here off the budget? We don't need police. So, anyway, so, you know, a time when we're going to need to come together, work together, live together, and have everything needed in order to do that. And I see that as, you know, this region. I'm going to take off on a little bit different tack here. Recently, so some people that's listening to this video may be familiar with what's called George Washington's vision. Allegedly, George Washington was in prayer, and he had told him nobody, you know, he didn't want to be disturbed. He was in his tent, and this figure came in. It was an angel, and he had this vision of 3 great calamities. First being the Revolutionary War, second being the Civil War, and the third being an invasion from all directions in the end times. And whether or not that vision actually happened to George Washington or whatever, but the vision rings true, because what he saw was that towns and cities had sprung up, and then we were invaded by both coasts and from both borders. And that's my contention, that not only might happen, but will happen. Oh, man. Get rid of this. George Washington's vision would be a description of what, you know, a really good description of what I see happening, because, you know, invasion from both borders and both coasts, things getting extremely brutal, people being backed up. Now here we come into a situation of, let's compare history. Well, if a nation is invaded or gets into a wartime situation, people retreat. People flee those fronts. Nobody wants to live in a war zone. You have a DMZ, a demilitarized zone. You have no man's land, you know, death lands, whatever. So people are going to retreat from those situations. If there's a tsunami, if there's a, you know, major cataclysmic CME caused or whatever, asteroid strike in the Atlantic or the Pacific, people are going to have to flee from that. They're going to go inland. Any kind of coastal event, for whatever reason whatsoever, people are going to go inland. If there's invasion through Canada by Russia, this was a clear enough, okay, let's back up just a hair there. in the scriptures, at one point in time, it was clear enough understanding by preachers that there was a guy, F.E. Pitts, who was invited to speak before the Congress, United States Congress. And his 2 sermons were centered around the fact that the Bible says that America will be invaded in the end times by Russia. And so, you know, that was understood at some point by some, you know, Bible believers back in that day. And the point that could happen would be that it's going to be coming in through Russia, and of course from the south, you know, could very easily be invasion. So we've been being invaded for decades now. There's a story about the you know, the naval patrol boat, Coast Guard or whatever, and there's a boat coming in, and it's rowing in, and they said, what are you doing? And they say, we're invading America, you know. And they said, you 3? And he says, no, we're the last ones, you know. So that's been happening over a period of time. And it's not going to be a pretty situation. Read Civil War II by Tom Chittum, you know. If and when things break down, there's going to be, he depicts an almost instantaneous overnight DMZ, 30 to 40 miles wide, because that's the range of howitzers. There will be, that'll be 3,000 miles long, and there'll be 10 million families displaced virtually overnight, okay? That's in his scenario, based on one theme and one thesis and one thesis only, and that is the You know, the fact that an empire will degenerate into civil war. So again, in that kind of scenario, in the George Washington scenario, George Washington's vision scenario, the scenario that I see is that there's going to be nowhere to go. It's just everybody, you know, the question about, you know, how can we get Americans to understand? Well, everybody should be able to see that. To me, these things are so obvious, so clear, so plain, so simple, that if you're just, it does require honesty. You know, let's deal with reality here. Okay. That's what you're looking at is, you know, invasion from borders and in coastlines. And there's an interesting little thing in George Washington's vision. This just hit me the other day, and this is to me really powerful. The fact that in some of the versions, one or two of the versions, there is the statement that George Washington said that I saw the inhabitants of the land. I saw the inhabitants of the land driven inland to and he mentions a wedge-shaped area, into a wedge-shaped area. And many, I mean, we've known about that one, people that I know. And people have wondered, and they've sketched little, oh, maybe it looks like this, and maybe it looks like this, and maybe it looks like this. And it just struck me about a week ago that the Ozark Plateau is, if you look at it, it's a parallelogram, it's a rhombus, which is in geometrical terms is two equilateral triangles. If you look at it from the north, it's a wedge-shaped area. If you look at it from the south, it's a wedge-shaped area. If you look at it from the east, it's a wedge-shaped area. If you look at it from the west, it's a wedge-shaped area. Look at it on Google Earth. It's a wedge or a triangular shaped area. It's a 4 triangles to every point of the compass. The Ozark Plateau is a wedge-shaped area. And it is considered what is called the U.S. Interior Highland. In the event of whatever kind of problem that may be coming down the pike at us, just an economic downturn. If the EBT system goes away, you're going to have mobs, you're going to have rioting, martial law, any kind of situation, invasion, whatever it may be. At whatever point in time, let's say just sanitation services, if there's a breakdown in sanitation, if there's a breakdown in law enforcement, you know, the ROL, rule of law. If rule of law goes away in a city, you've got no protection. In Argentina, instantly, kids could not play outside. They would be kidnapped. I mean, it was a completely unsafe environment for anyone. You hunker down, you're quiet, you don't let anybody know you're there, you don't let anybody know you have food, you don't let anybody know you have fuel. In a city, all of those things are going to be compounded by each other. Sanitation. Dysentery and cholera will kill millions of people in a bad situation. You know, let alone, I mean, you know, plague, rats, you know, there's no control over those things. when the other services, the sanitation services go down. Water treatment. We already spoke about, you know, water treatment in a big city. What if that breaks down? You got no water to drink, no clean water. And everything is going to be compounded by all the other factors that exist in a city that don't exist out in the country.
Because in country you have
the reason to get out of the city in the event of a disaster, and talked about it a little bit, I mean, but you have the issues of sanitation, you know, rats running rampant, you know, dysentery, cholera is going to kill more people than probably getting shot. The other issues are, you know, clean water. If the services break down, you're not going to have clean water to drink. And then you've got the gangs and everything else, all the other issues of problems of, you know, high population center environments. Basically comes down to there's 3 rules. Somebody said there's 3 rules for survival. Number 1, get out of the cities. Number 2, get out of the cities. Number 3, you guessed it, you know, get out of the cities. high population centers are not the place to be for multiple reasons. There's no food, there's no drink, no clean water. I asked, I don't know how many people when I lived in Denver, I would ask them, what is the largest protein source in the Front Range? 3 million people in the state, about 2 million of them lived in the Front Range. I never got the right answer. One woman said popcorn, but I don't know, popcorn. But anyway, obviously the answer was their largest protein source was human beings, and in the event of a siege, get real. When you look at history, you look at reality, things that have happened in human history, and even you look at scripture, they say the same thing. If a city's under siege, things get really brutal. Cats and dogs disappear, and then children disappear for the same reasons.
Could you talk?
The question is how to get people to understand that things that have happened throughout history. We talked about a situation where a city's under siege. How brutal, how utterly horrific life can be, and how to get through to Americans that life here can possibly be that elemental, that medieval. And I would just have to say that's a $64 question, $64 million question. One thing is to read history, I mean, and like I said, when you look at the history and it says the same thing, that, the siege instances in the Bible, and read some fiction. Read about the Civil War, for crying out loud. And life was that brutal here. It was horrific. And read some fiction. Read some science fiction and fantasy. That's one of the things I did I read the thing many, many years ago that if you can't prepare physically, if you can't economically prepare physically, at least prepare yourself mentally. And reading scenarios of the future, whether it be science fiction or whatever, of that type of environment, of that type of situation, you can see really quick how life could be that bad here in America. And that's what one of the major things that conditioned me to wanting to get away from the survivalist mentality of I've got my bug out bag and I've got my bug out vehicle, and someday if the posterior excrement hits the rotating oscillator, I'm going to go out to my bug out location. And I was like, that's really not a very good or intelligent approach. I think I'm just going to go live at my bug out location, So, but fiction would be a good way to do it. I mean, I'm going to put it this way. A lot of people just don't understand where water comes from. As hard as that is, I mean, it may sound absurd, but it's true. I'm going to put it this way. Water doesn't come from out of a tap. They think water comes from out of a tap. They think it comes from out of the spigot. You turn the garden hose on, you water your garden. Well, the problem with that is that there is, you got water treatment plants. Your water's piped in from miles and miles away. I grew up in Denver. Denver's living in is a completely artificial situation, as is most of California. They don't have water available. Now, I was on a survival group, and one guy said, I made the comment about, well, the Ogallala Aquifer is drying up. He goes, I don't care about water. I'm not a farmer. And yet he claimed to be a survivalist. It's just mind-boggling. Water is, yes, it comes out of the sky, it rains, but if we don't have springs, if we don't have streams, if we don't have ponds, if we don't have rivers and lakes nearby, if your water is coming from miles and miles away and it's being treated, and you don't have water. You don't have water available. It can be shut off at any time. One of the biggest differences between the Ozark Plateau and the rest of the country is that 90% of the water in this country, the drinking water, comes from recycled, treated water treatment plants. 90% of the water in the Ozark Plateau comes from, of the drinking water again, comes from wells, from personal wells. So that is a huge difference. You have a complete night and day situation difference between those two areas, regions. The question here is kind of relating to the difference between water sources in cities and water sources in a rural environment, let's say in a homesteading environment type of situation, in a farm environment, in a rural environment. And this is it's something that is very hard for people to wrap their head around. But I'm going to put it this way, people think that water comes out of a tap. They think that water comes out of a spigot.
Real quick.
Yeah, we can hold for a while. Yeah. As far as quality of water, there's a huge difference between, you may have water that tastes great coming out of your city tap, but testing's shown that, I mean, we've got, there's drugs in it. There's people are flushing their medge down the toilet, and that stuff gets through the purification systems. There's more and more testing being done by, really good scientists that indicate that water has memory. And so we have an issue of, good, clean water that is right out of an aquifer versus water that's been, treated and retreated. There's an old saying when we lived in Kansas that by the time the water hits Kansas City, it's been flushed 3 times. Topeka uses it, and then Lawrence uses it, and then, every city along that river uses the same water, and it's dumped back out into the river, and it goes on down to the next city. So, there's water, that is not the purest. There's toxins in it.
Hello?
If the grid goes down, number one, one of the simplest methods is what's called a bale bucket. They can be designed, built by hand. We have one. That's one of your simplest ways. Gravity, drop it down, gravity fills, you pull it up. Secondly would be a pump system similar to what Darren Greer has designed in this building. Water buck pump, I believe it is. Other people, we needed, every single farm.
Okay. Could you, his name is actually Darren Holiday, I found out a while back.
I thought that was the right. I thought it was Darren. I thought he wrote me and he said, "Can you?" Yeah, you're right. Greer is. Then the next one would be a manual pump system. I know Darren Holiday was interviewed, and the water buck pump. We need one of those on every single farm in Missouri. I hope he can, go into massive production and see those installed. Yeah. What about debt? Well, on a national basis, we're so far gone. It's, we're so close to the economic balloon popping, so let's not even address that. I would say on a personal level that we need to be out of debt. I mean, you can't live free if you're in financial bondage. We orchestrated our lives so that we would be able to get out of the city, and having done that, we got out here, bought a farm, 10 acres, paid it off within a year. Totally feasible out here in the Ozarks. Now, where land's $5,000, $10,000 an acre or whatever, maybe not. But, $1,000 an acre, $1,500, whatever, it can be done. We did it. And that was coming out of Denver with nothing. No job, no money at all, no insurance, no anything. Just 10 years later, we bought a farm, paid for it. We now own 70 acres. So, anybody can do it. I'm going to say anybody can do it if you want to do it. Just pack up, leave, do it. Could people homestead effectively with lots of debt? That's kind of a tough one for me because I'm so non-financial. But I would say no, unless someone's going on the premise that, they're going to finance a lot of things, and then someday the economic balloon is going to go up, and they'll end up not owing anything. But I just can't see doing any kind of homesteading on that kind of a premise. My philosophy is, you know, whatever you're going to do, we bought land and paid it off in a year. I mean, whatever you're going to do it in a way that you can pay it off in a short term. The word mortgage is from the French, and it means, you know, like mortuary, mortician, death, pledge. You're making a bet. You're, you know, making a pledge that you might pay it off before you die. Most people don't. So that's not a way to live. That's not a way to live free. So ideas on getting a homestead without incurring much debt. One of the things I would recommend is getting out. Let's say you pick an area, get on your local Craigslist or whatever, and get in touch with people that live there. State exactly what you want to do. I want a homestead. I want to learn to farm. I want to get out and have chickens and goats. 9 times out of 10 in any region of this country, there's an old couple around, or there's farmers who want to pass their knowledge on. And you get into a situation like that, and you find that those people have, that's what their heart's all about. That's what their life's all been about. Their kids have grown up and gone, or they, you know, don't have children or whatever. They have no one to pass that information on to, that knowledge on to. And